For centuries, the mummies of ancient Egypt have captured the imagination of the world. They lie in darkened tombs, wrapped in linen, buried with treasures, watched over by gods painted in gold and lapis blue. To most people, these mummies are symbols of death and the afterlife. But to scientists, they are something more. They are the closest thing we have to a time capsule of the human body itself. For decades, archaeologists dreamed of unlocking the genetic secrets inside those ancient remains. But there was a problem, an almost impossible barrier. The Egyptian climate is merciless on DNA. The heat, the sand, the humidity of the Nile, the chemicals used in mummification all acted like slow-burning fires, destroying genetic material strand by strand. For nearly a century, attempts to extract DNA from Egyptian mummies failed. What little was found was often dismissed as contamination from modern handlers. Some scientists even claimed it would never be possible, that the DNA of mummies was gone forever. But history, as always, has its surprises. In the early 2010s, a team of researchers led by German scientists tried something daring. They turned not to the fragile, soft tissues of mummies, but to the dense bones hidden deep within. Specifically, they drilled into the petrous bone, the thickest part of the skull, near the ear. If DNA survived anywhere, it would be there, locked away like treasure inside a vault. And when they sequenced it, they were stunned. Against all odds, they had recovered authentic ancient DNA from Egyptian mummies. For the first time in history, the genetic code of the pharaohs and their people could be read. What they discovered overturned long-held beliefs. For years, many had assumed that ancient Egyptians were genetically similar to modern Egyptians, with strong connections to sub-Saharan Africa due to the geography of the Nile, but the ancient DNA told a different story. The mummies they tested, dating from the New Kingdom through the Roman period, were genetically closer to ancient peoples of the Near East, the Levant, Anatolia, and Mesopotamia. Their closest genetic cousins were not deep in Africa, but across the deserts and seas, in the lands of the Fertile Crescent. This was a revelation. Painted a picture of Egypt not as an isolated civilization, but as a true crossroads of the ancient world. Traders, migrants, and conquerors moved along the Nile just as they moved along the Tigris, the Euphrates, and the Mediterranean coast. Egypt's greatness, it seemed, was not built in isolation. It was built at the very heart of a vast network of peoples. Think of the implications. The pharaohs who built the pyramids and temples were not ruling over a people untouched by the world outside. Their bloodlines carried traces of travelers, merchants, and settlers from distant lands. Their DNA was a map, showing connections stretching from the Aegean to Mesopotamia. Egypt, the land of Ra and Osiris, was part of something bigger, the first great global web of civilizations. But the findings also raised new questions. If ancient Egyptians were so closely tied to the Near East, why do modern Egyptians show more genetic connection to sub-Saharan Africa? The answer lies in the long and complicated history that followed. After the time of the pharaohs came centuries of conquest, migration, and empire. The Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantines, the Arabs all left their mark. The slave trade, both trans-Saharan and later across the Red Sea, brought in new populations. Layer upon layer, Egypt's genetic story became richer, more complex. The result is that modern Egyptians, though still carrying the heritage of their ancient ancestors, also carry the legacy of every wave of history that has washed across the Nile Valley. In a way, their DNA is like the layers of paint on a temple wall, ancient designs underneath, but altered by centuries of new colors. And yet there was something even more mysterious hidden in the data. The DNA revealed that ancient Egyptians had far less sub-Saharan ancestry than today's population. This suggested that large-scale genetic shifts must have happened in the last 2,000 years, a relatively short span in the grand scale of history. What could have caused such a transformation? Was it climate change, driving new migrations? Was it political upheaval, invasions, or trade routes shifting southward? Or was it something even deeper, a forgotten chapter of human movement across Africa that we have yet to fully understand? Each mummy, each genetic sequence, opened new questions as much as it answered old ones. And each one was a reminder of how fragile, and yet how powerful DNA can be. Perhaps the most haunting thought of all is this: The pharaohs themselves, the god-kings of Egypt, are now silent in their tombs. But their DNA is not silent. It speaks quietly but clearly across millennia. It tells us that Egypt was not just the gift of the Nile, but the gift of many peoples, many journeys, and many lives interwoven across the ancient world. And so, with the DNA of the mummies, a curtain was lifted. A civilization that had long been studied through its monuments. Its art and its writings was now being studied through its blood. And what it revealed was both surprising and strangely familiar. That even in the age of pyramids and pharaohs, humanity was already connected, already mingling, already one. For generations, the story of the Neanderthals was told as a tragedy. They were, we believed, our cousins who lost the race of survival, a species close to us, but not close enough. They lived in the caves of Ice Age Europe, crafting stone tools, hunting mammoths, enduring winters that would have frozen us to death. And then around 40,000 years ago, they were gone, extinct, replaced by us, the so-called modern humans, or so the story went. In the 19th and 20th centuries, Neanderthals were cast as brutish, dim-witted, less evolved. Their skeletons, with heavy brows and stout bones, were reconstructed in museums as hulking cavemans, stooping, hairy, and slow. In contrast, with the Homo sapiens were presented as clever, graceful, destined for civilization. It was a comforting story. We survived because we were superior. But history does not always flatter us. In 2010, a group of scientists led by Svante Pääbo managed something no one thought possible. They sequenced the genome of a Neanderthal from bones found in a Croatian cave. The world watched as the data came back. What it revealed sent shockwaves through science. Because within that DNA was a secret that connected us to them in a way no one had dared to imagine. When researchers compared Neanderthal DNA to the DNA of living people today, they discovered that everyone outside of Africa carried fragments of Neanderthal ancestry between 1% and 4% of their genetic code. In other words, the Neanderthals had not vanished at all. They lived inside us. This discovery rewrote the history of our species. The story of replacement, the neat narrative of one species triumphing over another, crumbled. In its place emerged a more complicated, more human story. One of encounters, of unions, of shared lives under Ice Age skies. Picture it. Tens of thousands of years ago, in the forests of Europe or the plains of Western Asia, modern humans encountered Neanderthals. Not once, but many times. These were not always battles. They were meetings, conversations, exchanges of tools and fire. And sometimes they were something deeper moments of closeness that would echo in bloodlines down to the present. The very fact that you may carry Neanderthal DNA means that, at some point in your distant past, your ancestors and Neanderthals were not enemies, but companions. And their legacy, though small, remains written into your skin, your bones, your very being. But what does this legacy mean? Scientists have begun to uncover how these fragments of ancient DNA affect us, even now. Some Neanderthal genes influence our immune systems, making us more resistant or, in some cases, more vulnerable to certain diseases. Others shape our skin and hair, helping our ancestors adapt to colder climates with lighter skin that absorbed more sunlight. Even more fascinating, some studies suggest Neanderthal DNA may influence our sleep patterns and our moods, subtly affecting the rhythms of our lives. Imagine that. The way you sleep, the way you respond to sunlight, the way you feel in winter, these may all be whispers from Neanderthal ancestors, long gone but never forgotten. And then, just when the world was coming to terms with this revelation, a new twist appeared. In the year 2010, in a remote cave in Siberia's Altai Mountains, archaeologists found a single finger bone. Just a fragment, small and unremarkable. But when scientists sequenced its DNA, they realized it belonged not to a modern human, and not to a Neanderthal, but to something entirely different. A new branch of humanity. They named them the Denisovans. Unlike Neanderthals, Denisovans left behind almost no bones. Only a handful of teeth, a few fragments, and that single finger bone. But in DNA, they left an astonishing legacy. Millions of people alive today carry Denisovan ancestry. Places like Melanesia, as much as 5% of DNA comes from them. In Tibet, the Denisovan legacy is life-saving. A single gene inherited from them allows Tibetans to survive at the world's highest altitudes, where oxygen is scarce. Without Denisovan DNA, the great civilizations of the Himalayas might never have flourished. Think about that. A species we never knew existed until a decade ago gave humanity one of its most extraordinary abilities: the gift of breathing thin mountain air. The Neanderthals and the Denisovans remind us of something humbling. We are not the last survivors of a neat evolutionary ladder. We are the heirs of a tangled family tree, with branches that met, merged, and wove together. We are a mosaic of many people, some remembered, some forgotten, some only rediscovered when their DNA emerges from the dust of time. And perhaps the most haunting question is this: if Neanderthals and Denisovans live on in us, what other lost cousins may still be waiting to be discovered? What bones, what fragments, what invisible codes lie buried beneath our feet, holding stories that could once again change everything we thought we knew about who we are? For now, the Neanderthals whisper through our veins. Their presence a reminder that history is not just written in books or carved in stone, it is carried in the blood of every human being alive. Today, every civilization leaves behind ruins, broken walls, shattered pottery, inscriptions worn down by time. But not every civilization leaves behind its story. Some are remembered only in fragments half-whispered in old texts, hinted at in the ruins, or feared as enemies in the legends of others. For centuries, archaeologists could only guess at their origins. But with ancient DNA, forgotten peoples are beginning to speak again. What they say often rewrites the stories we thought we knew. The Indus Valley civilization flourishing over 4,000 years ago in what is now Pakistan and northwest India was once the rival of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Its cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were marvels of urban planning. Straight streets, advanced drainage systems, and mysterious seals carved with symbols we still cannot read. Where are the Indus people? Where did they come from? And where did they go when their cities crumbled? For decades, the mystery was impenetrable. Archaeologists had bricks and beads, but no voices. Then, in 2019, a breakthrough came. Scientists managed to extract DNA from a woman buried in Rekhagari, one of the great Indus sites. It was astonishingly difficult. South Asia's climate is brutal for DNA preservation. Yet against the odds, her genome survived. The results revealed something extraordinary. The Indus people were a unique mixture. Their DNA carried traces of ancient Iranian farmers, but also of local South Asian hunter-gatherers. They were not invaders from outside, nor an isolated people. They were a fusion, ancient blending that helped give rise to one of the world's first great urban civilizations. And though their cities fell, their descendants did not vanish. Genetic studies show that echoes of the Indus Valley people live on in millions across South Asia today. A civilization once silent now speaks, not through writing, but through DNA, whispering that they are still here in the blood of their descendants. For centuries, the Philistines were known mainly from the Bible, remembered as the enemies of Israel, the people of Goliath. Their origins were debated endlessly. Were they locals? Foreign invaders? A myth? Archaeology uncovered Philistine cities like Ashkelon, with pottery and architecture that seemed strangely foreign, more Aegean than Levantine. But proof was elusive, until DNA revealed the truth. In 2016, researchers extracted DNA from burials in Ashkelon, and suddenly, the mystery cracked open. Early Philistine remains carried genetic signatures from southern Europe, the Aegean world. Over generations, as they settled in the Levant, their DNA blended with local populations, but the evidence of their migration remained clear. The Bible's enemies, once thought mythical or misunderstood, were real migrants who had crossed the sea, bringing with them new styles, new genes, and a new identity. They were not shadows of a story, they were people with families and faces, whose descendants were absorbed into the tapestry of the region. Across the Atlantic, DNA is also rewriting the story of the first peoples of the Americas. For decades, scientists debated when and how humans first crossed from Asia into the New World. The traditional story spoke of a migration across the Bering Land Bridge around 13,000 years ago. But DNA told a different, deeper tale. Ancient genomes from Native American remains revealed that people had arrived much earlier, carrying with them lineages that split off from Asia more than 20,000 years ago. Some even showed connections to populations in Siberia, and surprisingly to ancient Australasian groups. Even more striking, DNA revealed continuity between ancient remains and many Native American groups alive today. This proved what indigenous peoples had long said, that they were not newcomers, not replacements, but the direct descendants of the first peoples of the Americas. And in South America, DNA uncovered another mystery. The mighty Inca, whose empire stretched across the Andes, were once thought to have been a ruling elite imposed on conquered peoples. But genetic evidence shows continuity. The Inca were deeply tied to the populations they ruled, their bloodlines stretching back thousands of years. Empire did not erase identity, was built upon it. The power of DNA is not just in solving mysteries, it is in restoring dignity. Civilizations like the Indus Valley, the Philistines, the forgotten ancestors of the Americas, were once treated as shadows, as puzzles, as lost peoples. Now they are revealed as real, complex, human, alive in their descendants. Every new genome is a voice returning from silence. Every sequence is a testimony that no people has ever truly lost. They may vanish from stone, from text, from memory, but they remain carried quietly in the blood of the living. History books often speak of migrations as sudden invasions, waves of horsemen, fleets of ships, armies pouring across borders. But DNA tells a subtler, deeper story. It shows that migrations were not just battles and conquests, they were marriages, births, and generations of blending. They were the quiet movements of families and tribes, as well as the thunder of warriors. And when we look into ancient DNA, some of the greatest mysteries of human history suddenly make sense. More than 5,000 years ago, on the vast grasslands of the Eurasian steppe, there lived a people called the Yamnaya. They were herders of cattle and horses, living in wagons, moving with the seasons. For centuries, they were almost invisible to archaeology. Few monuments, few cities, little to mark their presence. And yet, DNA revealed something astonishing. Around 3000 BCE, the Yamnaya exploded outward from the steppe, spreading west into Europe and east into Central Asia. They carried with them new technologies, most importantly, the domesticated horse and wheeled vehicles. But they also carried their DNA. In Europe, genetic studies show that entire populations were transformed. Up to 70% of the ancestry of later Europeans can be traced to the Yamnaya migration. This was no mere trickle of settlers, it was a tidal wave that reshaped the continent. Even more astonishing, linguists realized that the Yamnaya likely carried with them the roots of the Indo-European languages. The family that today includes English, Spanish, Russian, Hindi, Persian, and hundreds more. In other words, the Yamnaya were not only ancestors in blood, they were ancestors in words. Every sentence you speak may carry echoes of their ancient tongue. It is haunting to think that a people who left almost no cities, no great monuments, left behind something greater. Their DNA and their language, now spread across half the planet, but migrations are never simple. In Europe, the Yamnaya did not erase the Neolithic farmers, who had already built villages and megaliths. Instead, DNA shows a blending, sometimes violent, sometimes peaceful, between steppe herders and farming communities. The result was a new people, carrying the blood of both. In their DNA, we see the creation of Europe as we know it today. This was not replacement, but transformation. The descendants of farmers and steppe warriors built Stonehenge, sailed the Atlantic, and laid the foundations of medieval kingdoms. Once again, DNA tells a humbling story. Civilizations are not built by one people alone, but by the mingling of many. On the other side of the world, another great migration was unfolding, one of the most astonishing in human history. Thousands of years ago, seafarers from Taiwan and the islands of Southeast Asia set sail into the unknown Pacific. In canoes carved from trees, guided only by stars and waves, they discovered island after island. DNA reveals how these Polynesian voyagers carried their genes across the Pacific Ocean. reaching places as far apart as Hawaii, Easter Island, and New Zealand. Their migrations created one of the largest cultural networks in the world, spread across thousands of miles of open sea. And yet, DNA also uncovered something more mysterious. In South America, traces of Polynesian DNA were found long before European contact. This suggests that Polynesians may have reached the shores of South America centuries before Columbus, leaving descendants in places like Chile. Imagine the courage it would take to cross an ocean wider than empires, guided only by memory, song, and the stars. For centuries, the Vikings were remembered as raiders blonde, blue-eyed warriors who sailed from Scandinavia to terrorize Europe. Their legend is written in blood and fire. But DNA revealed a more complicated picture. Genetic studies of Viking burials across Europe and even Greenland showed that many Vikings were not purely Scandinavian. Some had ancestry from the British Isles, the Baltics, even Southern Europe. Viking armies, it turns out, were not just Norsemen, they were mixtures, melting pots of adventurers, traders, and captives. Even in Scandinavia itself, Viking DNA showed surprising diversity. The image of a homogeneous race of raiders crumbles in light of genetics. The Vikings were not just conquerors, or connectors, weaving together bloodlines from across Europe and beyond. It's from the Yamnaya steppe riders to the Polynesian voyagers. From the Philistines crossing the seas to the Vikings riding the waves, migrations were not exceptions to history. They were the rule. Civilizations rise and fall on the tides of human movement, and DNA proves it. Every modern population is a palimpsest-layered manuscript, written over and over by migrations, conquests, and unions. Beneath the surface of every nation lies 1,000 journeys, 1,000 forgotten footsteps. The old view of history nations is fixed, pure, isolated, is shattered. Instead, DNA shows us the truth. Humanity is a river, ever-changing, ever-blending, flowing across continents and through time. Every human being alive today carries stories older than recorded history. The discoveries of ancient DNA have shown us that our genomes are living archives, storing secrets of migrations, conquests, adaptations, and survival. These are stories not written in stone or paper, but in the very cells that make us who we are. The past is not distant. It is alive inside us. Some of the most extraordinary revelations from ancient DNA are hidden in how humans adapted to diseases. For centuries, plagues reshaped civilizations. The Justinian plague, the Black Death, smallpox, and influenza waves. Each epidemic left scars, not just on societies, but within our DNA. Geneticists have discovered allelous variants of genes that became widespread because they conferred resistance to deadly diseases. Some of these are legacies of Neanderthal DNA. Others arose in response to plagues that swept through Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Every cough, every fever, every life saved or lost is reflected in the genetic record of our ancestors. DNA teaches us that survival is not just cultural, it is biological. We inherit the battles fought in the bodies of those who came before, and through them, we are stronger, more resilient, and more connected to the past than we ever imagined. Ancient DNA also reveals how humans responded to the shifting climate of Earth. During the Ice Ages, humans retreated into refuges, populations shrank, and gene pools changed. When the glaciers receded, they moved, spread, and intermingled. The DNA of modern humans reflects these movement traces of droughts, floods, and extreme winters are encoded in our genomes. Even today, the ability of certain populations to thrive in deserts, high mountains, or Arctic tundra is linked to genetic adaptations honed over thousands of years. Ancient DNA does not just tell a story of who we were, it tells a story of how we became who we are. But this knowledge comes with responsibility. Every genome extracted is the trace of someone who lived, loved, and died long ago. Scientists must navigate the ethical challenges of disturbing ancient remains. Respect for the dead, for descendants, and for the cultures involved is paramount. Ancient DNA restores lost voices, reconnects descendants with their past, and illuminates forgotten chapters of history. It is science with reverence, a delicate bridge between life and memory. Even with all we have discovered, much remains hidden. Who were the first Americans? What is the origin of the mysterious populations in South Asia and Oceania? Are there more branches of humanity like the Denisovans that await discovery in caves or permafrost? The answers lie buried in the earth, in bones, teeth, and soil, waiting for science to unlock them. And as technology advances, the stories will grow richer, stranger, and more profound. Look inside yourself. Your DNA carries echoes of Neanderthals, Denisovans, steppe warriors, seafarers, and city dwellers. You are not merely a product of your parents or your nation. You are the culmination of thousands of migrations, hundreds of civilizations, and countless lives that stretch back tens of thousands of years. We are, in the deepest sense, connected. Across continents and millennia, every human shares threads of ancestry, weaving a tapestry that binds us all together. Ancient DNA has taught us a humbling lesson. History is not static. It is not written solely in books or monuments. History flows in our blood, in every cell, in every heartbeat. It is alive, constantly reminding us of our shared origins and our shared future. Every discovery challenges assumptions, sparks wonder, and deepens the mystery of who we are. And as science continues to decode the secrets of the past, one thing becomes clear. The story of humanity is more intricate, more astonishing, and more beautiful than we ever imagined. So when you look in the mirror, remember this. You are part of history itself, a living, breathing testament to the countless journeys, struggles, and triumphs of all those who came before. And through your DNA, their story continues forever alive,